Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to today's session on contingency planning, which we are super happy here at Glisser to be running in conjunction with our wonderful partners at the EMA, who we know are completely passionate about making sure that you guys are as prepared as you can possibly be for the journey that the entire event sector is still going on, which, let's be honest, it's still pretty up and down on the way through, and we have an awful lot that we are still experimenting with in the world of virtual and hybrid events, as we also start to get back in person too. So you should have received a poll on your way in, so you can let us know how you're feeling. I'm just going to look over to my second screen to see what sort of answers we're getting there. And so far, it looks like you guys are feeling pretty perky. But I am going to briefly introduce myself, my colleague Kate, and why we're pleased to be having this conversation with you guys today. So we both work at Glisser. Glisser is a virtual and hybrid event platform, but we both work in our customer success team, which means that we work up close, personal with our customers day in, day out to try and make sure that their events are a rip-roaring success, not just a success, but a really great success. And what that means we are very privileged to be included in is contingency planning. And so we have seen over the last couple of years, great contingency planning, not so great contingency planning. We've seen accidents and whoopsies happen. We've seen some out and out all right catastrophes, and probably everything in between too. And today we are going to try and share a few tips with you to help you be better prepared for your next virtual and hybrid event. So Kate, thank you for joining me today. It makes it much more fun when there's two of us instead of just the one. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself? And I think it'd be great if you could share a little bit of your event agency background as well.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Vanessa. So I'm Kate. I'm Director of Customer Success at Glisser. So I manage the UK team, and my previous experience has actually been very much in the live event sector. I've worked at my sort of 4 previous roles have all been at creative integrated agencies. So working across a range of client portfolio brands and helping them with their strategic events, mainly involved experiential, but primarily live event experiences. So lots of contingency planning had to be put in place for these, because when you're working in a live event, who knows what can happen. So yeah, really, really pleased to be chatting to you today, and really, really pleased to actually be talking about contingency planning, because it is really, really important to ensure that events are delivered to the best standards, successfully, seamlessly. So yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, Vanessa.
Cool, no worries. And for you guys who are with us live, I know many of you be watching on demand, but if you are with us live, you'll see we have some very basic slides over on the top right-hand side. And below those slides, you'll see there are a few buttons that you can press. And particularly, there's a Q&A button there. So please do send any questions that you have in, because we will definitely try and include them. And I know that even those who may not be watching live and watching on demand will still benefit from the questions that come from you guys, as you will no doubt have a lot in common, whether you're live or on demand. So Kate, thank you very much for a quick intro there. And I think that the most important thing that we can say is, firstly, try and make sure that you think about contingency planning as a positive and not a negative, because we often find when we're having our conversations with clients that they can find the contingency planning, it's basically planning for when things go wrong, and it can feel very negative, very sort of things that they don't want to talk about, because it's, you know, sometimes you're talking about a real worst case scenarios. But I do think it is incredibly important that the narrative around that and the sort of mindset around that is changed from being, oh no, this is really bad, to actually, we are doing an incredible job as event planners by being really proactive about contingency planning and about being open about what to do if things really do go incredibly wrong, because you're going to be much better off if you've had that open conversation, as opposed to, burying your head in the sand and avoiding talking about it because it can feel a little bit uncomfortable on the way through. So today we're going to talk about some of the must-dos. I'm going to talk about some of the don't-dos as well. And Kate's also going to share a couple of real-life examples of customers who have had quite complicated event setups and how those were contingency planned for. So we figured if we shared with you some of the most complicated examples, then you're going to be super well prepared for anything that you might have that's a little more straightforward. We're also going to talk about an instance where things did go wrong. We're obviously not going to be naming any client names here, but we will still share the case studies so that you can hopefully learn from those and avoid falling into those same pitfalls in the future. And we will be sure to get to your questions too. So Kate, I'm going to chuck this at you a little bit and ask you top three. The first three things that spring to mind when it comes to contingency planning, and I might make a few notes whilst you're sharing these, what would those top three things be?
Top three. So I would say first one being having a live stream running simultaneously as a backup. I think that's an extremely valuable thing just to put in place. And you rarely would ever have to need to use that backup. But I think having one set up, running simultaneously means that if there is ever any reason that that particular stream goes down, you've already got one running. So it's a really quick and easy switch over. Nothing needs to be set up, nothing needs to be discussed. It's just a quick switch over. So I'd say that would be one of my top three. The second one I would say would be identifying a chain of command. So in the case that there was any issues that came up, that everybody is absolutely clear what their role is in that moment. And ultimately, who is that final decision maker who will decide to go for plan A, B, C, or D? And I think having that clear chain of command means that at the moment, in that moment, everybody knows what their role is, what they need to do, and things can just be put into place quickly. It's very time efficient and it's more stress-free. So I think identifying that in advance is really important. And the third one I would say would be rehearsing. So for some of our very complex events, we would run up to 3 to 4 rehearsals, but I would say generally we'd run 2 rehearsals. First one being for just the core team, and the rehearsal would be really running the event through step by step. First of all, just checking all of the moving parts pieced together, but also checking that everybody's clear on their role on the day. And more than likely, things will pop up during those rehearsals, which the team maybe haven't thought about, or they've suddenly noticed something because they're seeing it from the audience view. And it means then on that second rehearsal where you may invite your key stakeholders, that second rehearsal would run really smoothly. And then the live event, it's been tried, it's been tested. I would say those rehearsals work. When we work with clients who do run those rehearsals, you really do see the difference in the smooth running, and you're just a step ahead of the game, really. So I would say they would be my top 3. I think we may have lost Vanessa here, so we'll just wait for her to rejoin.
Really awkward. That was me.
Hello.
I muted myself. I'm so sorry.
I was just thinking this is a prime example of contingency planning, and I was about to just jump into talking about what I thought were the next more important things and what would be the best practices for contingencies.
Well, there we go. There was a classic moment right there. What do you do when one of your speakers mutes themselves? And what Kate did was perfect. She just styled it out and remained calm, which we may come back to again in the future. Ever so sorry, everybody. Completely my fault. Back with you now in full. So of those three, I want to talk to you about the live streaming piece first, because I think it would be good for us to just expand on this slightly. And there's also been a question that's come in about live streaming. When you say have a backup live stream running, what do you actually mean? Can you, really flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah, so clients will all be using different streaming solutions. But for example, if a client was using YouTube or Microsoft Stream, for example, they'll be running their stream through one player. But they would also set up a backup, so run the stream through Zoom, for example. So it would just be running that same stream, but through an alternative video player, which means if for any reason that particular stream video player goes down, then they've got an alternative backup running simultaneously.
Got it. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So if they have, if they're using the streaming, which is within they've got a platform perhaps, also additionally feed that stream into a completely different platform somewhere just in case you need it. Great. And that would require you to work with your AV production company to make sure that they are being streamed, that your content's being streamed into the two different locations at the same time, one of which you probably and hopefully won't need to use, but it's just there just in case.
Exactly. It's very rare that you even really use these contingency options, which is great. That's what you want. But having it all there set up, ready to go, means that in the case that you do need to, it's just really, really smooth running on the day.
Yeah, makes sense. And the question that came in is, when a live stream isn't working, who should an event planner contact? I never really know. And I think this is a really good question, actually, because this is certainly something that we do encounter from time to time with some of our clients. And I'll start with the answer, and then Kate, maybe you can top it up a bit. So basically, you need to contact whoever's provided your streaming. Excuse me. So if your streaming is part and parcel with a platform that you're using, then that would be your go-to point for the live stream isn't working. If you've worked with a production company and part of your agreement with them is that they will take care of the live streaming through their own channels, their own perhaps licenses with live streaming providers, then you would need to go to your AV, your production partner. Or if you're doing a straightforward webinar, like through something like Zoom, actually, maybe I should have started with this because it makes it clear, then that's your live stream app. Zoom would be your live streaming service in that instance. So that's where the the first port of call where you would actually be going to. And I understand why this is quite a complex one. If you're still developing your skill sets, and particularly the hybrid and also virtual event space, but it's basically whoever is actually providing your live streaming service. That's where you need to go to. Do you think that covers it, Kate, or is there anything to add on top of that?
Yeah, then I suppose the only other thing to add would be if they're using Glisser Stream, which is our own native video streaming solution, then it would be to contact us. So that would be the only additional part to add to that. But yeah, absolutely, it's whoever is managing the specific live stream. I think there's sometimes a bit of a grey area when there's the video stream provider and also the tech platform of who the client should speak to. But yeah, whoever is managing that specific live stream.
Okay, great, thank you. And the chain of command piece, I think, is such a good suggestion to avoid that in the moment, who's going to make the decision. Really, really wise. In your experience, having seen, as you said, fortunately not too many of these instances, because it is rare that you have to draw on your contingency plans, but having seen this happen occasionally, should that be the key project manager who has the ultimate decision making, is the top of that chain of command? Or actually, is it better to have somebody who perhaps is in a slightly removed position and perhaps isn't quite so absorbed in the heat of the moment when something might go wrong? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think actually having someone slightly set apart, maybe more senior than the project manager, who can actually just take a step back and look at the overall picture and look at what impact it would have to their audience. But I think it would be the project manager working closely with their sort of direct line manager or their most senior stakeholder to make that ultimate decision.
I'm glad I asked, because that's quite good advice, I think. And it might automatically seem like contingent at the project planner, but actually just having that slightly removed viewpoint can be really beneficial. Okay, and then rehearsing, I think, goes without saying. I don't think we need to go into that too much more. I think all I would add to that is allow more rehearsal time than you think you need, because that's part of contingency planning. So if you don't need it, great, but you had it there in case you needed it, that extra time for rehearsal. And certainly, speaking from direct experience, we ran a really quite complex hybrid event for ourselves last July, and we did run out of rehearsal time, and we thought we had plenty. Now, everything went fine. I mean, it was actually brilliant. So as it turned out, we were okay, but it added a lot of stress into those last couple of hours when we all realized that we were going to run out of time to do the full run through. So that would be my piece of top up advice to Kate's there, just to add on a little bit more time than you actually think. So what about things that maybe don't make it into the top 3, Kate, but are still must-dos that you still feel are super important, based on seeing quite a lot of clients go about contingency planning in very different ways?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's so many, but a couple that come to mind would be in your pre-event planning, to actually create an event tracker that contains all of the key information that you need. And it means that the core team are all directed to one document that's got the latest, most up-to-date information. And within that document, you can have a number of different tabs for different elements of the event, but also having one specific tab for contingency planning, which lists out what to do in different scenarios. It also includes the signed off copy, any other pieces of content needed, and that chain of command in there. So if anyone needs to refer back to it, it's all in one place. They don't need to trawl through emails or trawl through messaging. And I think that's worked really, really well for team members and given them peace of mind as well.
Mm-hmm.
Another one would be to agree on finalized copy that would be needed in the case of a change of plan. So that would be the likes of the copy that would go onto the chat feed if there is any technical difficulties experienced, or an email written up to be sent out to attendees if for any reason the live stream goes down or there's a change of plan, and just having that copy all signed off and having it ready to go so it can just quickly be sent out, I think is very valuable and will help save time and save any back and forth in the moment.
Mm-hmm. On that note, I just thought of this. We do have a template for this sort of project planner that Kate's mentioned there. If anyone would like a copy, just ask the team at EMA and we'll be really happy to share it with you, because there's no reason why we shouldn't share the love on these sorts of things. If it helps people be better prepared for their next event, then we're very happy to be part of that, whether it's an event with us or not. I think, share the love, as I said. And that documenting it, I think, is really important. So actually it says this on the slide at the top right that you guys can see at the moment. Document your contingency plan so that anybody can pick it up at any time. I think it's really important. It's not only important for the well running of the show, but it's really important for you as an event organizer to know that this is all on paper somewhere, and in that heat of the moment, it is possible for other people to access it and read it without you having to be the only person who knows it because it's in your brain and no one else does. So it's almost a case of helping yourself out there a little bit. So we've got about 10 minutes more. Let's talk a little bit about the don't do's. So things which you would recommend clients avoid at all costs.
Don't do. So I would just advise them not to panic. I think it's very easy when things happen that are out of your control to get stressed and get flustered and not think straight and maybe not make the right decisions. So I think it's it's okay to just take a bit of time to think, not make any quick rash decisions, and actually try and be as calm as you can be in the situation, which means the decisions will be taken with a bit more thought and ultimately lead to a more successful event.
Yeah. Don't panic. Easier said than done, right?
Absolutely.
But you're absolutely right. Your panic never helps, and it does always add, I guess, to the stress of the moment. But I think also I would probably add to that, just don't rush to make decisions. And that's, again, easier said than done. But it's better to just take 30 seconds longer, even 2 minutes longer, and then restart or redo or improve whatever the situation is, what you're doing for the best outcome, rather than making a quick decision which actually may not really get you that much further back on track to where you wanted to be. So yeah, sometimes I guess less is more. Take your time, try to avoid making that rush decision. And if you imagine an in-room only event, 2 minutes really isn't very much time. In fact, it's quite common to start a session 2 minutes late at an in-person only event. But those 2 minutes in the online world feels like an eternity. And if you're in a hybrid setup, you actually have got to be incredibly punctual on your timekeeping, because 2 minutes for an online viewer, they're sitting looking at their screen for 2 minutes, possibly getting bored, disinterested. Those in the room are probably, you're still trying to get them in from the coffee, and they're dragging their heels a little bit. So I think that would be another piece of advice that I feel plays into timekeeping overall, is to really try and give yourself as strict timings as you can on the hybrid front.
Yeah, and just to add to that, actually, I think if you've already planned for every scenario and you've already got contingency plans in place, I think that allows you to be calmer because you've got it covered. So best practice would be get everything in place, do as much planning as you can in advance, which will allow you to be calmer on the day.
Yeah, calmness is always a good thing. So what we're always looking for. I think the other don't, I referred to this right at the beginning, but in case we've had a couple of people join since the introduction at the beginning, is don't avoid talking about the worst case scenarios. As I said at the beginning, it can feel really uncomfortable and negative and defeatist almost, but don't avoid discussing the worst case scenarios. You will only be pleased that you have, should one of those worst case scenarios actually come about, because you'll have a plan for it and you'll be able to deal with it. If you haven't discussed it because it feels negative, then you'll definitely, I'm sure, end up regretting that. Okay, there's been a couple of questions come in, so let's have a quick look at these. What's the best way for a team to communicate during a live event? And I think this is a really good question, because when you've got hybrid events, you've probably got some people in person, almost certainly got some people in person, some people online, perhaps a production crew, some sitting somewhere totally different, perhaps bringing all of your live streams together. And so communication is paramount. What do you recommend?
Yes, so I'd always recommend setting up a green room for your core team and have that video call set up and have it running in the background. So in the case that something does not go to plan, you can just jump on that call. You don't need to be setting anything up. There's no sending anyone dial-in details. It's already up and running. And I think it's always really worthwhile to have a backup comms in case the chat feed went down on that video call for any reason, even the likes of just WhatsApp on a different device, so you can have direct communication for any emergency. So I'd say that would be best practice, in my opinion.
Great. And something that we use that was really great, it's an actual technology tool, is called Unity. So this is it's a paid for service, but it's basically like headsets that everybody has, which is like an open phone line to each other all the time, wherever they happen to be based. So if you have got a complex hybrid event with perhaps multiple hubs taking place at the same time, the Unity comms system it's exceptional, actually. And I know certainly quite a few of our clients use it. We used it for our own event. If you've got a large team, well worth considering. If there's just a few of you, I think exactly what Kate just said there. And that's what an awful lot of our customers do. They just have those video conference rooms running. It could be Google Meet, it could be a Zoom, whatever your standard preferred just regular conversations tool is. Just have those running for whichever groups you might need. So it might be the whole project team is involved, including AV, or it might be that you have one or two of those, one that's just your internal team and perhaps one that separately has quick access to your AV team as well. Depends who your key players are in your virtual or hybrid event setup. So moving on, Kate, I want to ask you to share a couple of real life scenarios. We've got 5 minutes left, so maybe we'll do a couple of minutes on each of these and then see if we can get through a last question in the last minute. You had an event not so long ago, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact number, but there was somewhere between 7 and 10 concurrent breakout rooms, all taking place at the same time. And there was a lot of contingency planning that went into this to make sure that every single one of those streams would be able to run at the right time. Timekeeping also really important here. How did the client go about doing that?
Yes, so did have an event. The client actually wanted to run the plenary and the breakouts as simulive. So it's basically would be it's pre-recorded content but scheduled as live. So there was lots of uncertainty between whether there was going to be 7 breakouts or 10 breakouts. And we knew it was going to be a last minute decision because that was based on senior stakeholders' decisions. So we already in advance had made a plan of action that if those breakouts did increase from 7 to 10, for example, we would need to change the streaming solution, because if it increased to 10, that would have a significant impact on resource. It would put a stretch on their production team, and it would be quite high risk to have that taking place based on the other complexities of the event. So when we actually found out the decision it was going to increase to 10, we'd already had the plan of action in place that we were going to swap it to a pre-recorded option, which meant it was lower risk, and also it didn't need to pull on a large amount of resources. And what was discussed really was what's the balance, like what do we want to achieve from a attendee perspective, and how much risk are we willing to put onto the event. And the decision was made on that. And I think they really recommended, they really appreciated the recommendation from a trusted partner. The attendee experience was still excellent, and it ensured that it was a successful event in the end.
Great. And anything you would do differently? Oh, it sounds pretty thorough, but just in case, anything that you would have done differently to improve it?
I think for that one in particular, absolutely everything was covered. It was a really, really rigorous contingency plan. So no, actually, nothing springs to mind for that one.
Great.
I think it was very, very smooth, which is why I've used that one as an example.
And then another example that we were talking about when we were preparing for this around live streaming. And there was an instance you had where live streaming, not Glyssa, I will add, but the live streaming selected for that particular event failed in some way or another. Can you talk us through what happened in that scenario?
Yeah, sure. So for this particular event, we had plenary, and then we had 3 sets of 3 concurrent breakouts. And the client was actually using their own Zoom webinar account integrated within Glyssa. So what actually happened for one particular breakout, their Zoom account went down for some reason. But luckily we had put in place some plans, and we had approved copy. So basically when it was identified, we jumped on our core team green room, discussed what to happen. We posted the approved copy on the chat feed. We uploaded a technical difficulty slide so the attendees were aware, so there was no panic. And then we just quickly closed the session, re-uploaded it with the backup Zoom account. And then the session was live again, running with the backup. It was already running as a simultaneous backup, so there wasn't anything that needed to be reset up in advance. And we were able to brief the moderator as well, let them know what was happening. So once we were live again, the moderator was able to just apologize for the short technical difficulties, and the whole process basically took no longer than 3 minutes. So because there was a short command, because there was approved copy, because there was the backup stream, it just happened step by step, and it was up and running before you know it. So that was a really good example of how having those things put in place resulted in a quick, very, very quick process.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic, actually. And had that backup stream not been in place, though, it does sound like it would have been a very, very different set of circumstances with creating the stream, creating the language to share with attendees of what to do next. It really, actually, contingency planning kind of saved the day there a little bit.
Absolutely.
Okay. One of the questions that's come through is, what do you do if the internet goes down? Any thoughts on that?
Wow, this is one thing that is absolutely out of your control. So there's not really much you can do on that particular point. If the internet goes down, the internet goes down, and that is working in live events. It's very, very, very rare. But if it does happen, I would say what I would recommend would be have the communications in place. In the case that happened, you could send out, have an email ready to send if needed, and be ready for when it does come back into action to reschedule the session and run again. But yeah, there's not a huge amount that can be done in that situation. So stay calm, and I'm sure it will be resolved quite quickly.
Yeah, I guess really that the only thing you can do in that situation is lean on whatever contingency plans you put in place. But I do remember being asked that question by our AV provider for our July hybrid event that we did, and he said, what are you going to do if the internet goes down? And I remember thinking, this is an internet-based event. If the internet goes down, we're going to really struggle. So I think actually in that instance, the contingency plan is almost, are you going to rerun it another time? And is that what you're going to tell your attendees? Or are you just going to keep going and hope that it comes back within the next 30 minutes? And I do understand why this is a concern for people, but you've still got to have a plan, as negative as that may sound. And now the questions come through really quickly. Are moderators worth it? It's a big investment. You just mentioned moderators there. I actually have quite a strong opinion on this, so I might go first if you don't mind too much.
Yeah, sure.
I really think they are worth the investment, actually. Depends what your event goals are, and who your audience is. So if your event is an internal communication, it's informal, and it's not something that will cause any impact if there are issues, or it's just simple, straightforward, informal, probably not. If actually you are running a major communication either for a brand or for yourselves internally, and it's a hybrid event, I will specifically say on this, I think they're worth every single penny for the management of the overall audience experience that you get. Taking contingency planning off the table for a moment, they're exceptionally good at engaging both online and the in-room audience cohesively as opposed to separately. But if something does go wrong, they are professionals. That's one of the things that they're trained to do, is to handle and smooth out any issues that may materialize. And I feel that untrained moderators, so regular Joes that might speak at events, they have a habit, I've done it myself, of referring back to mistakes or errors or any mishaps in the running of an event, almost as an excuse as to why things aren't perfect. Whereas a moderator will address it, clear it up, probably make light of it or smooth it over, and they won't reference back to it ever again, because it's a moment in the past and they're just looking forward to the future and the rest of the event at that point. So yeah, in my opinion, they're 100% worth it. Kate, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree that they're worth the investment. I think they really help kind of pull all of the moving parts together and bring all of the ideas to the table, help to give the event structure. And in the case of an issue or a change and solution, they can help communicate that to the attendees, and it just gives them much more of a professional feel to the event.
Yeah, agreed. All right, we have to wrap up. We've run slightly over, so thank you if you have stuck with us. I can certainly see that it looks like at least everyone's stuck with us, which is great. Really quick summary then. Make sure that you have a live stream backup for every live session that you are using. Make sure you've got a great chain of command in place so that should decisions need to be made in a high intensity moment, everybody knows who's responsible for making those. And rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. Those are the top 3 contingency planning recommendations. Top don't do's were panic, and avoid talking about things going wrong. Make sure you just stay calm and are able to stay calm because you've addressed everything in advance of the live show and not waiting for it to potentially go wrong in the moment. Thank you so much for sending your questions in. They were really great to make sure we're directing the content in the right direction. Kate, thank you for sharing your experiences. I know you've got more of these coming up later on today even, so hopefully contingency planning won't be needed, but it's really great to know that well, everyone's in safe hands if the contingency plan has been put in place. So thank you so much, Kate, and thank you also to all of our viewers.
That's a pleasure. Thanks a lot, Vanessa.